So first, before we get too far, I'm going to add a second class library to our project. And in that class library project, we're going to create a class that's called our SQL user utility. So to add a project, right-click on the solution, add new project, and I'm going to choose a class library. And to keep with my naming, I'm going to say mod 4. Actually, this is mod 5. And this will be our SQL data access layer. And that default class comes, so I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to right-click on that project, my new project, add class. And I'm going to call this my SQL user utility. And make it public. All right, so now I have this new class that will be my SQL user utility. Now the idea here is that you want to build interchangeable parts. And if you remember back to the idea of scope, your scope identifies what parts of your class are public, that can be viewed by other pieces of code, what parts of your class are private, that can't be seen by other pieces of code, and then you also have protected and internal. The thing that we're most interested in is making sure that the public members, methods and properties and events, of our XML user utility are the same as the public members of our SQL user utility. Because we want to be able to call either one of them and have the parameters that the methods take and the method names be the same. So to do that, the easiest way is to go through the process of actually creating an interface that they both implement. Now, typically when you think of interface, you probably think of user interface, which is the screen that the user interfaces with. What I'm referring to, and the term I like to use to kind of differentiate, is a programming interface. And that's the interface that the programmer works with that provides consistency, and you can kind of think of it like a contract that says that any class that implements this interface has these members. So it's kind of this contract between the person writing the interface, the person writing the class that implements the interface, and then the person who's actually writing the code that's using that interface and that class. Now in our case, we're all going to be one and the same. But sometimes you have instances where those parties are different people. And I'll show you an example of that when we get into the SQL pieces. So I'm going to go back to my core, and I'm going to right-click here, and I'm going to do add item. And then instead of choosing class, I'm going to choose the item below it called interface. And I'm going to give it a name of user utility. Before I get too far or take far too much time, has anyone ever dealt with interfaces before? Okay, has anyone built an interface before? Okay, you have? All right, you want to come up here and do it? No. Okay. Just asking. All right. So the idea here is that this is that contract that we're going to follow. And this contract has to parallel what public members we have inside of XML user utility. So let me pull that up. We'll actually do a side-by-side here. Zoom out just a touch and tuck that out of the way. And then what I like to do, and there's an easier way to do this, but I'm going to show you the hard way first. So the approach that I typically like to take is I like to take whatever class that I want to create an interface for, and I collapse all of the body methods, or the bodies for my methods and properties and anything else, because I just want to look at the signatures, which is that first line of your method, that public name, or public return type name parameters. That's the piece that I'm interested in. And the reason is that that is the piece of the class that gets transferred into the interface definition. So over here we have That's the constructor, so we skip that. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 public methods. And those 4 public methods are the 4 methods that need to be part of our interface. So to create those members or those method definitions, we simply copy them without the scope. So we don't include the public part. So we'll take the add user. So it's user, add user, user template, semicolon. No curly brackets, nothing like that. Yes?
So is it automatically public since it's a public interface?
Because it's an interface, all the members have to be public.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily because the interface is public, but that by definition, that's the purpose of an interface, is to project the contract for all the public members. So for delete user, it's void delete user, user user. Now I will say that the parameter names, so in delete user is called user and add user is called template, those do not have to match, but the types do. So if I really wanted to, I could just call this user, and everybody's okay with that. You're allowed to change those names, but the type of object being passed in is still a user in both cases. That's the thing that's important. So it's just like your variables. You can name your variables whatever you want. It doesn't really matter, but you can't take a string and put it in an int variable. They have to be the right type. That being said, for clarity, it's always best to use names that are descriptive. And since this is treated as a template for adding a user, I like to call it template. All right, void update user, user user. And then this will be a list of users. This will be get all users. Okay? So as simple as that, that is what's needed to create an interface definition for an existing class. Now the final step is to actually implement that interface, we have to be explicit. So our class that implements an interface actually has to be defined that it is implementing that interface. It can't just be implicit without saying that this class implements its interface. Otherwise, you can't cast an object of type XML user utility and store it into a variable type of iUser utility. It's that whole idea like inheritance, and it's notated the same way. So we come over here and we say XML user utility colon, and that colon defines either inheritance or implementation. In this case, we say implements iUser utility. And as simple as that, we've now implemented an interface. Yes?
Sorry, I just need to think about what